Hey, busy parents. Katie Kimball here from Kids Cook Real Food for another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we connect parents who so want to raise healthy kids with the experts who have the information they need. Today, I'm honored to host Danielle Binns, who I actually found, you guys, through a Facebook ad. Like, I'm scrolling Facebook, I know how to skip all the ads, and I'm like, wait, what? This person I need to meet. And here she is today. Thanks for joining us, Danielle.
And I'm so glad when I got that email from you. I was really thrilled. I've likewise wanted to connect with you. So it all worked out. The universe brought us together.
It's perfect. So we will talk today about what that was that caught my eye so dramatically that I did not scroll past, and I always scroll past all the ads. And we're going to talk a lot about kids and eating at the table and a really big twist on how Danielle helps families get their picky eaters to eat a wider variety of foods. So a quick introduction to her. Danielle Binns is a family nutritionist and a picky eating expert. As a mom of 3 little girls, including a former extreme picky eater, Danielle knows firsthand how emotionally draining it is to have a child who doesn't eat well. And after months of research and acquiring, certifications in children's eating, she went a little over what most parents do when they have a picky eater. But Danielle discovered a better way to approach meal times, and she's helped hundreds of families around the globe do the same thing. Today, Danielle helps parents with picky eaters achieve stress-free meal times through her personalized coaching programs, as well as her online program, the Picky Eater Protocol. She's also a nutritional consultant for companies and restaurants, which I love. Let's ditch those kids menus, right?
Yeah,
and she
right.
works with schools. She's a speaker at medical conventions. And one of her certifications is the SOS approach to feeding that we heard about when I interviewed Dr. Kay Toomey, as well as the Feeding Matters program. Danielle, are you maybe a type A perfectionist out there?
No, not at all.
No, she's just a pathological liar. No. So Danielle, I love that you had this issue in your life with your daughter, and it was draining, and I'm sure just like piling up, like, why can't I figure this out? But instead of simply relying on other experts, you went and got certified and all this stuff, and now you're sharing that knowledge with other parents. So that's awesome. But how did that process happen? Like, first of all, how did you even get into caring about healthy food? And then why the focus on these really challenging kids?
Yeah. So, it's so interesting because my previous life, I was working the corporate world at great companies like Microsoft and Bell Canada, for those of us in Canada. And then I got pregnant, and pregnancy was great. But near the end of the pregnancy, we noticed my midwife was really concerned because she saw my daughter's weight going from, the 20th percentile to the 13th to the 10th to the 3rd. And then they said, okay, you need to go in and get checked out. So we got checked out, and through multiple ultrasounds, one of them I will never forget. I can't remember, what do you call them? The people that do the around your belly,
Sure,
those guys.
Yeah.
Called in the cardiologist, and the cardiologist gave us a form that said, check mark congenital heart disease. Can you please come back? So we found out then that my daughter, our first daughter, after a great pregnancy, had a rather large hole in her heart and would require heart surgery by 4 months of age. All that with the fact that she wasn't growing. So anyway, she's born. It is a disaster trying to nurse this baby. Like, why didn't anyone tell me that nursing was not natural? Number one. And then I thought, that once we started solids, if things were going to get better, because we were doing weekly weigh-ins, and the doctor kept telling me she's not gaining. Like, what are you doing? You should be switching to formula, or, and so there was so much pressure on me doing all the wrong things. And then so I thought, okay, we started solids, and things actually got worse. She was a lot of gagging happening. She just pushed food away, resisted food, had a very small appetite. And of course, like I was trying all the things. And finally I said, okay, enough is enough. I'm a nutritionist. I can't even get my daughter to eat. Like, something is wrong with this picture. I know what foods to put out there, but she's not putting them in her mouth. So I dove into the research, took a bunch of courses, and figured out why kids eat the way they do. And that eating is actually one of the more complicated things that we do as humans. And so I started to apply all these strategies with Sienna, and she did a 180, so that's when I was like, okay, there's something here that I'm doing differently. And actually, when I went to go see the endocrinologist and her doctors, they said, wait a second, like she's actually picking up growth here and she's doing better, so much better with her eating. What are you doing differently? And they were taking notes as I was talking. The dietitians were taking notes. So I was like, there's something here I need to share with other parents. And that's how it started.
Most definitely. Well,
Yeah.
and maybe you're holding out for a little later. I can't wait to hear what you did. But should we start with what mistakes are made usually when feeding kids? Because obviously you too were doing something that wasn't working.
I did all the wrong things. Like you name it. I tell parents to do now. I'm like, yeah, you don't want to do that. So, when you have a child who's a selective eater, and then when you have a child who's underweight, it's really hard not to want to do all the things and get in there and nudge them and all that stuff, right? Because we're concerned parents. And so, one of the mistakes is that we are encroaching into our kids' area of control. And eating is one of the only things our kids do have control over, right? So the more and I know parents always tell me about this, like there's this power struggle that happens at the table. It's because it's push and pull. And so the more we push, they're pulling away. So the first mistake is not to, trying not to control how much our kids eat, like just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to eat what they need to, because the research shows that the more we relinquish that control, the more kids are able to self-regulate and they actually get what they need from a nutritional perspective. So I know we'll talk about nutrition a little bit later, but we want to, because sometimes kids just need more protein, right? And sometimes they need more carbs, and sometimes and so the more we interfere, we throw that balance off, and our kids are eating either more than they need or less than they need. So that's the first mistake. Did you ask for a few mistakes? I can't remember, or just one.
Well, are there other? I'm assuming that there probably are others.
I'll throw another one in there. Okay, sure. So the other one is, it's more of a myth versus a mistake, is that kids shouldn't play with their food. Eating is incredibly sensory. It's the only, as I mentioned earlier, the only human task that actually uses all 8 senses. And so playing with food, like getting our hands on food, and I'm sure Kay talked about this, Dr. Kay Toomey, that is an experience that they need to have before they put a food in their mouth. Because if they don't like the way or know how a food is going to feel in their mouth, they won't know unless they put their hands on it, right? So even if they're spreading hummus all around their plate, or they got food on their face and on the floor, I know it sucks. I had a white carpet under my table. It's no longer white and it's no longer there.
Or that not.
They eat a lot of blueberries and avocados, so it was is another art project. But just allowing your kids to get messy, it's okay. And if the research shows that if they haven't gotten messy by the age of 2.5 or 3, then no matter what age they are later, so let's say they're 8, 9, 10, like actually have to go back to that playing with food stage.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Okay. So that playing with food is not fun. It's actually like an important piece of development that literally cannot be skipped.
Right. Yeah. And that's why we say like play with purpose, right? So it's not just you're playing because it actually has an inherent like reason for doing so, because you're helping to prime their senses and helping to develop those sensory skills around food.
Okay. Yeah. So play is very important. What do you have any advice for parents for whom that just sounds horrible to them? Like, how do we get over our idea of like, I don't want the mess?
Yeah. It's knowing that this is going to benefit them. And ultimately you can wash the clothes, right? You can you can get rid of the carpet. Actually, there's a brand called Tile, and it's like squares tile that you put together. So if something food falls on one, you just take it away, wash it, and you put it back, right? So like things can be washed. And again, if this is a step that is skipped, it's not going to pay off in the long run. Like it does pay off in the long run if we do address it now. And just like anything, like with kids, play is so important. In fact, adults should be doing more play too. Like it also takes the stress the any negativity or negative associations around food, it removes those. And I can promise you that once your child, if your child is willing to smell and touch and explore food, it's going to get in their mouth so much faster. Right. So it's kind of like putting that neat, I have a lot of parents that I work with, and I'm just like, everything is so pristine in their home, unlike my home. And so they have a really hard time with it. But once they start to see the benefit, then it's, much easier. You can even just put a big bib on, those ones with like the long sleeves. Yeah. There's ways to prevent the mess if you don't, you want to try and contain that.
Gotcha. So their forearms don't need to be involved in the mess, just the hands. And face. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
So Danielle, you often say that nutrition is secondary at a meal. And I feel like a lot of parents might not understand that. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I know, right? Because I tell parents, even though I'm a nutritionist, I say nutrition comes second. What comes first is eating. Okay. So if my goal is to help parents expand their child's list of foods. And sure, we would love for those foods to be healthier. But if your child has no vegetables that they're currently consuming, it's hard to go from Cheerios to broccoli, right? So we need to get our kids where they are in order to make progress. So any new food is a good food. So if it's a different cereal, right, that is a different food. To us, it's a cereal. To them, it's actually completely different food, right? Wow. So it's like from a texture perspective, a sensory perspective, the way it looks, like everything is different about it. And so my goal is just the more foods we can expand to, then the more parents have to work with, and then the more comfortable our kids are getting, because their palate is expanding as well as they get exposure to those new foods. Even if it's like your kid doesn't eat cookies and they eat a Oreo cookie, then that's like actually a good thing, because it's a different food. And then ultimately, then we get to the broccoli through this time of working on other things in conjunction with food expansion.
Okay. So, I often tell parents when we talk about kids and cooking, for sure, I say, man, we got to raise the bar. We got to raise our expectations on what our kids can do. And this is so challenging to my brain, because in some ways you're saying, dude, we got to lower the bar. We have to accept the tiny baby steps and see that as progress instead of expecting perfection right away. Just to clarify, are you talking about all kids or kids who are already really struggling to eat a variety of foods?
Yeah, thanks for that clarifying question, because it depends on where your child's at, right? So if they have a list of 5 to 10 foods, then there's something else happening. If your child has 20, 30 foods, and they tend to be more, snacky foods, you got to look at what's been happening over time. Did we fall into this pattern of just giving the easy foods because they were more likely to eat? Did we set them on a different path? So I actually am an advocate for challenging our kids to try more. We don't give them enough credit for what they're able to do. But there is a segment of 10 to 20% of kids who are actually dealing with something. So, when you work with a professional like myself or otherwise, they're able to identify whether there's something bigger here what you're dealing with, or whether it's more behavioral and your child just needs to learn how to like more foods. And so we can push them a little bit harder. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yes. So this is, we're not saying parents of toddlers, be sure to give your kids Oreos just so they're expanding the palate. No. If you've got a toddler and they're just learning to eat new foods, obviously we try to serve them what we want them to eat. Right.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, I just want to say to that point, Katie and I just did a post on this, because we try to make things being amazing parents, we want to see our kids eat. And so we try to make things easy. I'm just going to give them something that I know that they'll eat or that they'll like. And so we do things like I found myself buying some pasta for the kids at this local healthy restaurant, and it had sauteed spinach and olives and all these veggies. There's actually more veggies than pasta, and we don't do pasta very often, but every once in a while I'll go grab that. And my first tendency was to let me take out the sauteed spinach and the herbs and things like that, because they're not going to want to eat it. I'm like, hold up, wait a second. That's called sanitizing our kids' meals. And if they don't have exposure to foods in the way that presented, and then they're not going to learn to like that, and they're just going to be eating buttered pasta, right? So try to, as much as possible, like throw in those mixed foods. And if your child doesn't like the things that are thrown in there, they can pick it out themselves. Because, you know, at first, sure, my kids were picking out a bit of the sauteed spinach or trying to avoid it, but they were touching it, right? A bit of it is getting on their fingers, they're feeling it, and they're getting familiar with that food. And now they just eat the whole thing as it's presented with the sauteed peppers and all that stuff in there. So, but it does take progress. It's not an overnight thing, but be okay. And even when we order pizza, I ordered pizza with anchovies, and actually it was like a bed of arugula. It's on my Instagram post. It's a huge bed of arugula that I didn't think it was going to look like that. And the kids were just like staring like, oh my God. But we just rolled it up. Like, let's see if we can roll it up. And they ate pizza with, like, arugula is pretty potent.
Yeah.
But it's great because it was a food that they never had otherwise tried. So yes, I'm all about the health and the nutrition for kids who can do it. But in some cases, we've got to bring the bar down for kids who are really struggling.
Okay. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think it is all about, you use the word progress and process, you know, the Canadian process. And that's the point, is to say, okay, your kids picking the green things out of the soup or the omelet or the pizza or whatever is actually part of the process. And so sometimes the parents' knee-jerk reaction is like, oh man, like, don't pick it out, like, just eat it. Or like you said, they sanitize the food. Oh, my kid's going to pick it out anyway, I just won't include it. But you're saying that can be an important step toward not picking it out.
Exactly.
So let the kids pick it out for a while and just see what happens.
Yeah. That is one of the ways that we are giving our kids exposure and helping to build their familiarity and comfort with food. The more they see it, the more familiar it becomes, the less scary it becomes, because food is scary, right? To them, anything new is scary. They don't know how it's going to feel in their mouth. They don't know how it's going to taste, and so on. So the more they get their hands on it, the better.
That's fascinating. I have to say that my husband, for quite a few years, would pick spinach and kale out of soup. And he was very surreptitious about it. He would hide it, you know, on the plate, sort of under the bowl, so that the kids didn't always know. But he doesn't do that anymore. So it even works with adults.
Oh, there we go. I do get the odd, it's funny, I get the odd comment after my webinars from parents just wondering, does this work for adults as well? Like, in some cases, yeah, there's some learning that happens in the process for sure.
Yeah, it totally does. So if nutrition is second, now we've talked about, we're going to let the kids play with their food, we're going to let them pick it out, we're going to expose them to a lot of foods, and eating is the most important, especially as we're trying to improve our highly selective eaters. When does nutrition come in? Like, what nutrients play a role in what kids need and how interested they are in food?
Totally. So nutrition is, you know, I just got off a consult with a family, and we were talking about breakfast and how, you know, what we feed our kids right from like that first meal of the day, it just sets them on a trajectory for the day in terms of blood sugar and so on. And so, in terms of, so I'll talk about macronutrients and then micronutrients. So from a macro perspective, there's, so instead of like thinking carbs, protein, fat, I'd call it PFF. You want protein, you want fat, and you want fiber, right? Oh. So fiber, and obviously in the form of fruit or vegetables, is preferred. But we often, like, you think about breakfast foods, most of them are very heavy on the carbohydrates, right? So this child was eating Cheerios with almond milk every morning, or oatmeal. So I'm always looking for ways to inject more protein and more healthy fats in for kids, because it then helps to stabilize their blood sugar, so they don't have these big spikes and crashes throughout the day, because that then influences how well they can participate and absorb information at school and their behavior. So if you see those like 3 p.m. crashes, tantrums on the floor with your child, like, it could be a blood sugar thing, right? Or just that they want to play. And but so one is the macronutrients, making sure that those are always present. And then from a micronutrient perspective, there's a couple minerals that are that play a role in appetite. So when I hear of children who don't have an appetite, it's either the timing of the meals and the types of meals that are offered if they have a lack of appetite. There's also iron and zinc have a direct correlation with appetite. So you see this vicious cycle because 1 in 8 toddlers is deficient in or has an iron deficiency. There's a vicious cycle because the iron also has a relationship with appetite. So if they have low iron or there's low in iron, then their also appetite is suppressed. Therefore, they're not hungry and therefore they're not eating enough iron. And so then the vicious cycle begins. And also with dairy, the calcium in dairy competes with iron and zinc. So that's why I recommend to families that they don't have milk with a dinner, because that's typically when iron-rich foods are served. So meats and things like that. Or certain legumes. So you want to have try to keep the dairy away from those iron and zinc rich foods. So zinc has an association is related to appetite. So if you think of elderly people, you notice how they my grandmother or Nona, she's at a home right now and her weight has really come down. Everyone tends to be her appetite is just not there because zinc is they lose their sense of smell and their sense of appetite. And so there's a connection there. Zinc levels are depleted as we age as well. And that's why you see the elderly people have consuming less and less food. So those are the ones that I would look at for sure.
What are some foods that are good for zinc and iron?
Yeah. So, the good news is what makes it easy is a lot of foods that are high in iron are also high in zinc.
Nice.
So your meat proteins, but you want to go for quality. Okay. So it's, we only consume grass-fed, pastured animals, couple times a week, pastured chickens, pastured eggs. So you want to focus on quality because, some of the conventional sources of meat are just, there's so much other stuff in those animals that you do not want your family to be consuming. And their nutritional profile is completely different. So for example, you'll find more omega-3 in a grass-fed beef than you would in conventional. And so, so meats is one. Seafood is often forgotten. So things like, oysters are the one that are known for the most zinc, but I'm not going to ask your kids to eat oysters, even though my middle daughter loves oysters and mussels. But scallops actually are so easy to cook. Just throw them on they take 5 minutes, right? With a little bit of oil or butter, and they're so delicious. And I put them on little toothpicks for the kids and they love eating them. They're easy to chew. So, so those are a couple of the big ones I would suggest.
Okay, that's great. I have never cooked a scallop ever in my life.
Really?
Maybe this will be a new baby step for me.
It's a problem because I take my kids to the fishmonger, and my daughter's like, scallops, the big, the big ones.
No, I don't. I don't know anything about scallops.
They are so expensive. They're the most expensive. And of course, my daughter. So I get him to give me 12 scallops, and then whatever, $10 is something crazy. But scallops are fairly pricey, but they're really nutrient rich. And even so many fish species that we don't consider, like mackerel, you don't even need to season with anything because it has such a wonderful flavor. Now it is pretty fishy, but it's one of the more nutrient dense fish is that we all go for salmon, things like that. But it's good to vary that up because you get a different nutrient profile with each.
That's fascinating. That's a great challenge for me. Now I'm curious, for your Nona, are you going to take her zinc supplements? Would that help in the absence of being able to consume enough zinc and iron rich foods? Can we supplement?
Yeah, so I would supplement, get tested first, make sure that you're not, because too much iron is also a problem. Yeah. It's constipating. So there's tests that can be done to determine where your zinc and iron levels are at before you start to supplement. It also helps if you're working with someone just to they can look at your food list and see, okay, yeah, there's definitely a shortage of iron here. And there's certain symptoms too that they can look at, when you have got that pallor or dark circles around the eyes or some of them, a blue tinge to the eye. So yeah, it's like a combination of things that we can look at before we start supplementing. I don't like to go to supplements because if it's costly, number one,
Sure.
kids don't really want to take it. Like zinc is not is the tastiest supplement. And yeah, so just in terms of compliance, it's hard for families. So I'd rather them go there only if they need to.
Sure. Yeah. So test, don't guess.
Yeah.
People say, yeah, test, don't guess. Now, what about, we've talked a lot about the table. Do you have any strategies that are helpful for getting kids involved in the kitchen? And is that a piece of this playing and eating and nutrition at the table?
Totally. So I every time I talk about it, I'm like, oh, I'm sure parents are like, oh God, here it goes again. Play, get your kids to cook in the kitchen. But it actually is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because there's a curiosity that develops, right? When they see, so for example, if we're making a smoothie or we're making my green pancakes and they're throwing spinach in the blender and the eggs and cracking the eggs and they see it come to life, there's this fire inside them. It's like, oh, I want to know what this tastes like because I actually made it. And even if not, the more they see it, the more they smell it, the more they're exposed to it, it's not going to be a scary food anymore. So playing it with food in the kitchen is great, or like helping to prepare it. But even, so we've got a kitchen counter with stools. And so when I'm done, like, let's say I love sheet pan meals. So if I'm baking a bunch of vegetables, I'll put that tray, once it's cooled down, in the middle. And that is when when your kid, like the appetite is quite strong right before dinner and they really want to snack. And so I'll put that out there and then they have, oh my gosh, I need to snack on something. And so one of the foods that my kids first tried in that way was Brussels sprouts. So, the leaves fall off. Mm-hmm. I intentionally, I love the crunchiness of it. So I was like, oh, these are called Brussels sprout chips. Right. And so they started eating them and the crunchiness, and then now they fight for the Brussels sprout leaves. So that was the first way. And now my kids love Brussels sprouts. Well, two of them definitely do. One is still working on it, but, yeah. So putting, even like there was a curried chicken that I'd made and they were on sticks and my daughter was so hungry, she just grabbed one off the tray. So keeping food within arm's reach is helpful. So if they're in the kitchen helping you, even more so. And if you're doing a skewer, maybe not with raw meat, but getting the kids to help skewer, right? Putting the things on there because they typically avoid the veggies on the skewer, but if they're helping, they're going to get some on like the pepper on their finger, and like their kids love to put their fingers in their mouth or their nose, but it's getting somewhere close to their face. They're actually going to get that sense of the aroma of the foods that they're preparing.
Very nice. I just heard you say, oh, my other daughter's still working on it. And I just have to point out and applaud that growth mindset, that language of like, we don't need to let our kids hear us saying, oh, they don't like that. It's about yet. It's about they're working on it. They're not there yet. And I just think that's such an important little twist of semantics that parents would do well to be more intentional about. Now, I told people, I kind of teased people that we would tell them what was in the Facebook ad that caught my eye, because you have sort of some like products that help parents strategize at the table. Tell us about those.
Well, it's so interesting because your comment about, you don't not like this food, like maybe you will later, you don't like it yet, is actually a big piece of this product. So it's a placemat for kids. It's called the Super Power Foods placemat, a bit of a tongue twister. But the idea was, and it came to me one night after speaking with a couple families and my clients, and they couldn't just let their kids do their thing. And I was trying to explain to them about like the sensory aspects of food and how we want to take our kids through like a bit of an experience so that their interest in their curiosity and drive to want to try the food build. And so I was like, how can I put this in like an activity sheet so that kids can then do this themselves? So it all came together, and what it does is it actually, I think I have it right here. So this is actually, you guys get a sample, a sneak peek at the prototype. So I'm now working on a silicone version of it. So kids go through the different sensory aspects. So how does the food look? how does it smell, how does it feel, and then how does it taste. They give the food, they become a food scientist, they draw a picture of the food if they don't want to put it here, and then they can give it a superpower name. So maybe it's like superpower broccoli, or strong-eyed carrots, or whatever. We've come up with so many, everything tends to be Wonder Woman for my kids right now. But then they get to rate the food. I like it today, or I might like it tomorrow, to Katie's point. So we're changing that language for our kids around, it's not a food I'm going to eat green foods when I'm a grown-up, right? It's about, you don't like it right now, but guess what? You might like it later. And they realize that, oh, wait a second, I actually like the way this food smells, or I like the way it looks. Maybe I can like the way it tastes. And so it's currently a digital product because I've run out, but you'll be seeing a silicone version of this so that you can just fold it up and put it in your purse and take it with you to a restaurant, to resorts. We're going to Punta Cana shortly, so I'll be bringing a few of these, and you can reuse it again and again. So yes, it's a really powerful tool, and it's been a couple thousand families now have been using it, and I get love notes every day about how it's changed the dynamic at the table for them.
That is so fabulous. And I think it's really interesting to separate the idea of liking the way it smells or looks versus taste, because a lot of times we just give our opinion on the whole food, right? Either you like it or you don't. But there can be these nuances, and just like picking that food out of the soup or the omelet and just like playing with the food and every exposure, right? That's like another little nuance that changes the way kids interact and make friends or don't make friends with their food.
Totally. Yeah, we don't, right. We just think about it as like a black or white.
Yeah.
I like or I don't, but yeah, there's so many different characteristics of the food. And actually it's fun. Like, for the texture piece, like, is it smooth or is it bumpy? Is it cold or is it wet? And you just start to, they're thinking less of it as a food, but more as like a toy. And that instance, right? We're removing we're taking eating out of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Which is good for kids and parents, because it's the eating part that causes the power struggles. It's the eating part that feels so stressful.
Exactly.
So would you use all those questions and that placemat like separate from a meal, or is this like the preamble to the meal?
It's, it's a great tool for either. So I sometimes suggest if it takes a bit of time to get food on the table and your kids are hungry, to get them to explore one of the foods that you're making.
Cool.
Right? So let's look at the kitchen counter, what we're having. What do you feel like, you want to be a food scientist? What should we explore today? And get them to pick. So you can do that before, because takes them about 5-10 minutes to go through the process. And once they do it once, because there's imagery associated with each word, they can do it on their own, or just on a plane, or you can have it at the table as well for after the meal. I don't really have any rules around that. It depends on kind of where the child's at, but it's really helpful for if you're trying to fill in some space. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you for showing us that. We got the sneak peek. Now, Danielle, you've given us a lot to think about and a lot to maybe implement. And I always like to distill down for busy parents, like one super practical step that you can accomplish right away and feel like, okay, I did something with that information, instead of the information overload. Like, well, I don't know what to do. So if you just said to moms and dads, one thing today with your kids, what would it be?
Well, I would say to take one of the sensory aspects, to just play up on this food scientist piece. So when you're having dinner tonight, whether they're helping you make the meal or just sitting at the table, you can just ask them a question and make it a family activity, as opposed to putting all the focus on your child and pick eater, because we tend to do that. And there's all eyeballs on them. And so it's, Daddy, which food at the table do you think is the crunchiest? Or, which food, how many green foods do you see at the table? Use something around the sensory aspects of the food. So if it's, carrot, let's see who has the longest carrot stick. Okay, let's measure them. Okay. Who has do you think your carrots, do you think it's smooth or bumpy? Do you think it's hot or cold? And just start to play up on that, because automatically you're going to feel that the kind of the stress lift from the table, because your kids are going to be having more fun. Because right now eating is not that fun for anyone. And so we want to try and find a way to inject some joy so that they're more likely to come to the table. They're more likely to sit and stay at the table longer, and they don't feel the pressure of having to eat it. So that's what I would leave them with.
I love that. So easy. So easy.
Mhm.
You don't really have to do, I mean, you can be still being busy and preparing the food. It's just talk, right?
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of mental energy. That's it. But it's so, so worth it. And whether your kids, I would say that's for all families, whether your kids are picky or not, because there's always growth. Well, there's always new foods to try, and that healthy relationship with food, which I think is the pinnacle here, right? We want a relationship with our food where we can play with our food, we can enjoy our food, we can say to our food, I don't really want to play with you today, you know, like just like a good loyal friendship. We want that relationship with food. That's fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. I will make sure that, you know, our listeners can find you wherever we share this interview, DanielleBinns.com and your Facebook and Instagram and all that, and just connect people to you. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. It's so great to chat with you face to face.
Yeah, and we will see everyone else next week for another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, where once again, I'll connect you guys who want to raise healthy kids with an expert who has the information you need. Thanks so much for being here.